Let's say you get sent this. No name, no phone number, no password, just a username. That's it. And you might look at that and think, okay, it's just a username, but what if I told you that sometimes that's enough to start an investigation? And no, I'm not talking about hacking. I'm not breaking into anything. I'm not buying someone's information from some shady Telegram group. Everything we're going to look at in this video is information that's publicly available, and we're going to see just how far we can take it. OSINT. What is it actually? Okay, so where do we start? Well, the obvious answer is the internet. You search the username and you might get results from Reddit, GitHub, gaming forums, other social media, and maybe you find something, maybe you don't. And honestly, most of the time you probably won't, and that's important. Because OSINT isn't some magical button where you type in a username and suddenly the entire life of a person appears on your screen. It doesn't work like that. Usually it's much more boring. You find one tiny thing, then another, and eventually those things start connecting. This is basically what people mean when they talk about username enumeration. You take a username and check where else it appears. For our video, we are going to take Reddit and GitHub as examples. So we have the same username, but on different websites. Now, maybe you find another profile picture, or maybe it's the same image. Now, that's more interesting though, because you don't just have now the same username, but you also have the same image. So across two different pages, you're potentially looking at the same person, but it's still not proof. A username can be reused, a picture can be copied, two accounts can look connected but still belong to completely different people. And that's something you'll see over and over again with OSINT. The goal isn't to find something that confirms your theory, but it's to find things that test your theory. And this is where things start getting interesting, because maybe that username has a link which leads to a website, and that website has an old post, and that post has a photograph, and suddenly you're looking at something completely different from where you started. That's the rabbit hole. You start with one tiny piece of information and you keep asking, what else can this tell me? And sometimes the answer is absolutely nothing, and sometimes it's a lot more than you expected. Now, forget the username for a second. Forget the account, forget everything. Just look at this. What do you see? Don't overthink it. Look at the background. What's there? A sign? A building? A business? Maybe there's some writing. Maybe there's a landmark. Or maybe there's absolutely nothing obvious. And that's the interesting part. Because a photograph isn't just a photograph, it's a collection of clues. This is where geolocation comes in. You take a photograph and try to figure out where it was taken. Sometimes it's easy, you recognize the building, you recognize the road, you recognize the city, and done. But sometimes it's not that easy. So you start looking at everything: road markings, architecture, cars, street signs, language, vegetation, even the way shadows fall. Because one clue might tell you almost nothing, but five clues pointing in the same direction, that's different. And suddenly you have narrowed down an entire country, maybe a city, maybe a street, all from a photograph. And that's not even the weird part. Because what if the photograph isn't actually from the person you're investigating? Maybe they downloaded it, maybe someone else uploaded it first, maybe it's been sitting on the internet for years. This is where reverse image searching becomes useful. You're basically asking, where else has this image appeared? And sometimes you find the original and suddenly your entire assumption falls apart. And honestly, that's good. Because finding out you're wrong is much better than being confidently wrong. And that is one of the biggest lessons in OSINT. Here's something that's easy to forget. The internet doesn't necessarily forget just because you did. Someone might delete an old post, change their username, delete an account, Move to a different website, but somewhere there might be still a copy, a screenshot, an archive, an old forum post, a cached page. Something you posted 6 years ago might still be existing somewhere, and you might not even remember posting it. And then there's metadata. A file can sometimes tell you things about itself. The software used to create it, when it was created, the camera that took it, its dimensions, and sometimes even where it was taken. Now, before you get excited, this doesn't mean you can download someone's Instagram photo and suddenly get their home address. Platforms can remove or modify metadata, and metadata isn't always there. But when it is, it's another clue, not a magic button. This is probably the most important thing to understand. Let's say you've got a username, a photograph, a website, a location, an old post, maybe some metadata. Individually, none of these things are particularly impressive, but put them together and now you've got something. And that's the part that people don't always understand about OSINT. The information itself isn't necessarily special, the connections are. And honestly, I think the most important OSINT skill isn't knowing 500 different tools. It's knowing when not to believe yourself. Because it's very easy to find something that looks convincing. For example, same username, same profile picture, same city, and then go, yep, that's definitely the same person. Except maybe it isn't. Maybe it's someone else. Maybe the photo was stolen. Maybe the account is fake. Maybe you misunderstood what you found. That's why good OSINT involves verification and corroboration. You don't want one clue, you want multiple clues that independently point toward the same conclusion. And even then, you should still be asking, what else could explain this? So after all of that, what actually is OSINT? It's not hacking, it's not breaking into accounts, it's not some secret government database. It's basically taking information that's already publicly available and turning it into something useful through research, analysis, and correlation. You search, you investigate, you connect things, and most importantly, you verify them. But there's one more thing we need to talk about. Just because you can find something doesn't mean you should. OSINT can be used for cybersecurity, journalism, fraud investigations, threat intelligence, research, finding misinformation, and plenty of legitimate investigations. But the same techniques can also be used for stalking, harassment, doxing, and targeting people. So there's a line, and that line matters. The fact that information is publicly available doesn't automatically mean that it's ethical to collect every piece of it and publish it. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do with information is to leave it alone. So let's get back to where we started. Looks pretty meaningless, right? Just a username. And that's the thing about OSINT. You don't need a massive database, you don't need some secret hacking tool, you might just need one username, one photograph, one old post, one tiny detail that someone else overlooked, and then you ask, what else can this tell me? That's OSINT. It's not hacking, it's just information and the ability to connect it.